on the BBC News Channel.
Hello, this is The Briefing. I'm Samantha Simmonds. Our top story. As fewer migrants cross the Mediterranean, shocking claims that many are imprisoned, abused and forced to work as slaves in Libya. Taking a stand against sexual harassment, Stars launch a campaign to support women in the workplace. And storm Carmen batters the coast of western France, cutting off power to thousands of homes. It's expected to cause more disruption as it heads east. China bans the import of millions of tons of plastic waste to protect its environment. Well, I'll be speaking to Laurie Cucaron, who helps run TerraCycle, a recycling firm that specialises in hard-to-recycle waste. A very warm welcome to the programme, briefing you on all you need to know in global news, business and sport. And you can be part of the conversation. Do you think the sexual misdemeanours in Hollywood last year will lead to change in the workplace in 2018? Tell us what you think. Just use the hashtag BBC The Briefing. Now, hundreds of thousands of migrants are stuck in Libya after the number trying to cross the Mediterranean Sea to Europe has been reduced by police patrols. A European Union policy of encouraging Libyan groups to monitor its coastline has reduced migrant travel by 70%, that since last July. However, the UN has called living conditions for the majority of African migrants inhumane. Over 5,000, mainly Nigerians, have been repatriated, and those returning from Libya have told harrowing stories of abuse. In this special report, the BBC's Stephanie Hegarty went to the city of Benin in southern Nigeria to meet those recently released.
Many of those who've walked the streets of Benin have dreamed of going to Europe. Jackson and Felix almost made it. But they were arrested in a boat off the coast of Libya and sent to prison in a place called Garian.
Before they sent me as a slave in the prison, I witnessed close to 10 deaths. The Mudi that used to guard us, which is the Arabu man, he came at the night, he now counted 20 of us.
Take us to the farm and work for a farm, harvest onions. We walk, no food. Sometimes
they said when they were no longer needed, they were dumped in the desert, rescued by a man driving by. They were repatriated to Nigeria with the help of the UN. We spoke to several Nigerian migrants, cross-checking the details of their stories, and each told us of the same horrifying trend: prison authorities leasing or selling migrants to local businesses as labour. It's a new development in a dark and brutal industry in which traffickers and prison guards extort migrants, forcing them to buy their freedom.
There were a connection man there that normally have the connection to the Mudi, that's the director of the prison. He will call them and he will beat them out.
Mac Agayere was arrested in Libya in 2015 and brought to prison in a town called Zawiya.
In that 5 months, God now used a man. I thought it was my Messiah. I never knew he's a bad person.
He says the man bought his freedom and forced him to work for nothing. After 3 months, Mac refused to continue.
They all called their brother. Then I used barbed wire to tie my hand, tie my leg, and push me inside the car. And they now took me back to prison.
Back in prison, he was told he was going to be deported. Instead, he was taken to Garian for 7 months.
How many people did you see die there?
Almost 20 of them.
In this hotel in Benin City, about 200 men and women who've just arrived from Libya are being processed and received by the authorities here. Many of them have stories of abuse and mistreatment at the hands of the authorities in the Libyan detention centres where they were held. And at least 3 people that I've spoken to so far told me they were forced to work for free or sold as slaves.
Most times they come to our caravan, they pick like 6 persons, take them out to do their dirty jobs, the farming, the bricklaying works, to feed their cattle. They give us out to their friends. They take us to their house. They use us, they don't feed us. The information came to us that they told our Nigerian ambassadors that Nigerians are no more in the prison because they want to make money from us.
Again and again, Garian prison is mentioned as a place of terrible abuse. It's run by Libya's Ministry of Interior, which itself is run by 2 militia groups. Libya is in the middle of a civil war, and these militia are only nominally under the UN-recognised government in Tripoli. The Libyan Interior Ministry didn't respond to our attempts to set up an interview. The UN's migration agency says there are about 700,000 migrants still stuck in Libya. Several African governments have stepped up efforts to get their citizens home, and thousands have been repatriated in the past few weeks, carrying untold trauma. Those that do come home have to begin the hard work of rebuilding their lives. Stephanie Hegarty, BBC News, Nigeria.
Now, more than 300 women from Hollywood's entertainment industry have launched an initiative to tackle sexual harassment in workplaces. The campaign is called Time's Up, and it includes Hollywood stars such as Cate Blanchett, America Ferrera and Eva Longoria. It's going to provide legal support for women and men who suffer abuse. Well, we can talk now to the entertainment journalist KJ Matthews, who joins me from Hollywood. Hi, KJ. Thanks very much for talking to us here on The Briefing on BBC World. Tell us more about this campaign, because they've already raised more than $10 million, haven't they, towards it? Tell us how it's going to work.
They're moving fast. You know, what's interesting that I've learned about this new initiative that kicked off on Monday here in the United States is that it's really been in the works ever since the Harvey Weinstein story broke back in October. There have been dozens and dozens of actresses, talent agents, lawyers, CEOs within Hollywood meeting every single week to say, what can we do to make sure this change is lasting? And what kind of initiatives can we put in place to make sure that things change? We don't want to lose this moment and just hashtag it to death. We want to make sure that Hollywood understands that things need to change, and here's how it needs to change. So they basically, after 4 months, came up with an initiative called Time's Up, meaning time's up for you to stop sexually harassing women in the workplace. Time's up. It's time for you to pay them equally. Time's up. It's time to get rid of NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, and that they've had it. So they basically have 4 objectives that they're looking forward to. The first thing you mentioned, which is the Legal Defense Fund. So far, it's raised $13 million from a few Hollywood bigwigs that have donated a couple of millions of dollars. And what they want to do is use that fund to help blue-collar women who may be facing sexual harassment or sexual misconduct and have reported it to their human resources office and face backlash. Many of these women in these circumstances do not have the money to fight big companies. That's where this legal defense fund would come in and help women who are in a blue-collar workforce who do not have the money or the power to fight back against this. The second thing they want to do is eliminate non-disclosure agreements. These are the agreements that many women who, once they report sexual harassment or sexual misconduct and a company wants to eliminate them or come up with a settlement, they often agree to pay them a certain amount of money in exchange for their silence, meaning they can never talk about any of the allegations with anyone ever. Many of the women say when they come forward to report things, they're not aware that there are other women who have had the same incidents or been in the same circumstances because of these NDAs. So they want companies in Hollywood and all across the world to really get rid of these NDAs. The third thing they want is gender parity. They want women working in Hollywood doing the same exact job with the same exact qualifications to be paid the same amount of money as men. And then lastly, they want a lot of the actresses that will be attending the Golden Globes, which happens this Sunday, here in Hollywood to use their red carpet interviews to talk about this new initiative and talk about ways they want to make sure that women pay the same.
KJ, really good to talk to you. Thanks very much for explaining what this new initiative Time's Up is all about. Thanks very much. Well, you can, of course, be part of the conversation as well. Let us know what you think. Do you think the sexual misdemeanours in Hollywood last year will lead to change in the workplace, wherever you work, in 2018? Tell us what you think. Just use the hashtag BBC The Briefing. Now, Storm Carmen has cut power to tens of thousands of homes in western France. Wind speeds of up to 140 kilometres an hour battered the country's Atlantic coast and is moving towards Germany. Elsewhere, a deep freeze has settled over large parts of the United States and Canada, bringing extreme cold, snow and, of course, travel disruption. Sarah Corker has the latest.
On France's Atlantic coast, New Year was ushered in by the arrival of wild weather. Strong winds and rough seas meant seaside cities cancelled traditional New Year swimming events. Winds exceeding 140 kilometres an hour knocked out power to thousands of homes across Brittany. This man said the storm was stronger than expected and had already done some damage to the roof. Police say one man in his 60s was killed when a tree fell on his car near the French-Spanish border. Elsewhere and across the Atlantic, the United States is experiencing a record-breaking Arctic cold. From Texas to Maine, the sub-zero temperatures and snow are unrelenting. At Chicago Airport, there were long delays.
It was brutally cold. I mean, 5 degrees and the lows in the single digits. It was something else.
And for almost a week now, parts of Canada have been colder than the North Pole. Niagara Falls have become an icy spectacle. With temperatures falling below minus 30 degrees Celsius, even the penguins at Calgary Zoo have been moved inside. There's widespread disruption on the roads, railways and in the air. But for these brave souls in Pennsylvania, it's never too cold for a New Year's dip. Sarah Corker, BBC News.
Now let's brief you on some of the other stories making the news. Police in Germany are considering whether to charge a politician from the far-right AfD for inciting hatred after she made anti-Muslim comments on social media. On Twitter, Beatrix von Storch accused German police of appeasing what she called barbaric gang-raping Muslim hordes of men. The Metropolitan Police are investigating the murders of 4 young men across London after they were stabbed to death in unrelated attacks in the space of 15 hours. So far, there have been 5 arrests in connection with the incidents. The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has said he will work tirelessly in 2018 to stamp out what he called the scourge of knife crime. Air accident investigators in Australia say it could take months to establish why a seaplane carrying a prominent British businessman and 4 members of his family crashed into a river near Sydney on New Year's Eve. Richard Cousins died along with his fiancée and her daughter. The pilot was also killed, as well as Mr. Cousins' 2 grown-up sons. Now, the Spanish Economy Minister, Luis de Guindos, has estimated the dispute over Catalan independence has cost Spain more than $1 billion. He said this was due to the slowdown in the Catalan economy after the unauthorised independence referendum. Well, Dr. Stephanie Hare is an independent political risk analyst and joins me in the studio, as you can see. Warm welcome to you. Happy New Year. Thank you very much for coming in. So what do you make of this figure, $1 billion? And this is obviously going on over several months, but it's hugely damaging to Spain's economy.
I'm really interested in comparing this to the Brexit parallel, for instance, right? So this only started really in October. I mean, there's been drumbeats of Catalan separatism for a while, but it really escalated in October, and then we've just had the vote on December 21. So to have €1 billion fallout, I would want to see a breakdown of the numbers for that, and I'd also want to see if it's actual job losses or just the legal headquarters that are moving of so many companies and banks out of Catalonia, largely going towards Madrid.
Yeah, so, I suppose we want to put this in context, don't we? This is Spain's economy minister. Spain doesn't want Catalan to break away.
Exactly.
So you're saying, suggesting there might be a vested interest here.
Yeah, I'd like to see what Brussels figures are on this. I'd like to see if the Catalonian separatist movements agree with these figures, etc. So you're right, there's an angle to be played here, but political uncertainty does have consequences for business.
Yeah, but there's still that uncertainty, isn't there? Because despite the election with the pro-independence parties coming out slightly ahead, it's still not clear what's going to happen.
Well, exactly. exactly. I mean, 2018 is looking like a mess for them, and it's a really difficult issue because the separatists have won the vote on the December 22nd or 21st referendum. So now what? How do they square the circle?
Yeah, we'll see, won't we? Stephanie, thank you. We'll see you a little bit later for the papers. For now, though, thanks very much. Stay with us on The Briefing. Also on the programme, Scotland's bookshop by the sea. Your chance to read, relax and even run the place.
The most ambitious financial and political change ever attempted has got underway with the introduction of the euro.
Tomorrow in Holland we're going to use money we picked up in Belgium today, and then we'll be in France, and again it'll be the same money. It's just got to be the way to go.
George Harrison, the former Beatle, is recovering in hospital after being stabbed at his Oxfordshire home. A 33-year-old man from Liverpool is being interviewed by police on suspicion of attempted murder.
I think it was good.
Just good?
No, fantastic.
That's better.
You're watching The Briefing. Our headlines. New claims that many African migrants are being imprisoned, abused and forced to work as slaves in Libya. Hundreds of stars and Hollywood insiders have launched a campaign in the US to fight sexual harassment at work. Protesters in Iran have attacked police stations late into the night as demonstrations across the country entered their 6th day. At least 13 people have been killed since the protests began last Thursday. Our correspondent John Donnison has been following developments.
Iran has not seen anything like this in almost a decade. The country's leadership under fire in the biggest protests since 2009. People are angry about high unemployment, rising prices and corruption. Police stations have been attacked. Authorities say one policeman was shot dead on Monday in the town of Najafabad. 3 other officers were injured. But in recent days, the country's elected president, Hassan Rouhani, has sought to downplay the protests and their significance, saying they were being instigated by Iran's enemies.
Our victory against the US and the Zionist regime is unbearable for our enemies. Our success in the region is intolerable for them. They're after revenge and are trying to provoke people.
But so far, his words have done little to stem the protests. In the past, to do that, the government has used force. There have been large counter-demonstrations organised in support of the country's leadership. But as the protests enter a 6th day, the message from many Iranians is they want change. John Donnison, BBC News.
Here's our briefing on some of the key events happening later. Prepare for rail chaos across London and the UK as protests take place over an increase in rail fares. The first scheduled protest is expected at Paddington Station from 0700 local time. Zookeepers at London Zoo are readying their clipboards and calculators for the zoo's annual stocktake. From lions to leafcutter ants, they'll all be counted as part of the audit, which is essential for zoo licence requirements. And later, Japan's royal family will make a public appearance to receive New Year greetings from well-wishers. The Emperor of Japan, Akihito, and Empress Michiko will make the scheduled appearance alongside immediate family members. Now it's time to bring you up to date on all the latest sports news.
Hello there, I'm Tolson Tollett. Coming up on Tuesday's Sport Briefing, the Premier League continues. Leaders Manchester City are in action later. They and Europe's big clubs can register new players from today, so watch out for the start of big spending and what could be a huge transfer window. There's a new darts world champion, and we even have a father and son duo sent off in the same football game that's making waves on social media. We haven't been saying this much, but Pep Guardiola's side will hope to get back to winning ways when they play Watford at home on Tuesday. Manchester City's 18-game winning streak in the Premier League was ended when they drew 0-0 with Crystal Palace on Sunday. They're still well ahead of their nearest rivals and unbeaten in the league, so still plenty to aim for.
When we win, it's just focus on the next one. When we didn't win, focus on the next one. Because I said many times, so we'll be a long road to be first. Everything can happen in football, so now prepare Watford at home.
The semi-finals of the Gulf Cup take place on Tuesday in Kuwait City. They've never won it, but Bahrain start as favourites against 2009 winners Oman. The other semi is the United Arab Emirates against Iraq. The UAE have won the tournament twice before, most recently in 2013. Their opponents Iraq last won it for the third time back in 1988. Now, in case you missed it, Manchester United returned to winning ways with a 2-0 win over Everton. Jose Mourinho's side had drawn their past 3 league matches, and the victory takes them back to second place and ahead of Chelsea, although they still trail Manchester City by 12 points.
Lovely goal. I think it's the performance of the team today was great. That helped us to create more chances, be more confident, shoot. Because if you don't shoot, we cannot score. And I think we did it today very well.
Liverpool extended their unbeaten run to 16 matches as Ragnar Klavan struck late for a 2-1 win over Burnley. Jurgen Klopp's side are now 6 points clear of 5th placed Arsenal, who don't play until Wednesday. To the NHL, where the New York Rangers scored a goal in overtime to win the 2018 Winter Classic 3-2 over the Buffalo Sabres. The match, played in front of almost 42,000, saw JT Miller score a power play goal to hand the Rangers victory at the home of the New York Mets baseball team, also taking the Rangers to a 4-0 record in outdoor regular season games. In darts news, Rob Cross playing his first ever PDC World Championship has shocked 16-time world champion Phil the Power Taylor to win at Alexandra Palace in London. The match was the last of the 57-year-old Taylor's career before retiring, but Cross prevailed with plenty of room to spare in the end, beating his English compatriot by 7-2. And what might catch your eye on social media? Well, we may have a football first. A father and son were sent off in the same game. Forest Green Rovers are bottom of the 4th tier of English football. When midfielder Charlie Cooper was sent off for a foul, his father Mark, who manages the club, protested so much that he was also dismissed and sent to the stands. Plenty of people enjoying the novelty. And you can get all the latest sports news at our website. That's bbc.com/sport. But from me, Tolson Tollett, that is your Tuesday Sport Briefing.
Now, reading more books is a popular New Year's resolution, but how about reading an entire bookshop while actually running it at the same time? That's what holidaymakers are being given the chance to do in Wigtown in Scotland. It's proving so popular, it's booked solidly until 2020, and the concept could soon be branching out into Asia. Our Scotland correspondent has been to take a look and have a read.
Between the hills and the sea in southwest Scotland is a small town where they like their books a lot. Wigtown is Scotland's national book town, and among the many bookshops here, one is available to rent for a week at a time. It's run by enthusiasts who want to be surrounded by books while trying their hand at selling some too.
Right, Helen MacDonald.
Alison Drury is a police community support officer from Bicester, but not this week. Instead, she is stacking bookshelves and shifting stock.
You are paying for the privilege of running a bookshop for a week. What do your friends make of it?
A bit of a mixture. I think some of them think that I'm a bit eccentric and think that it's a very strange thing to do. By the same token, I've got some friends who think it is extremely exciting and are very excited for me and actually a bit envious.
Have you been enjoying it?
I have. You can tell, can't you?
The temporary bookstore boss has free rein. Displays can change, so too can the promotions.
The chance to run a bookshop for a week or two has proved popular. People have come from as far away as New Zealand, North America and South Korea to run this place. There was a couple in their 80s who came on honeymoon and others who liked the town so much that they stayed.
The shop, which once came close to closure, turned around by those who have a dream of running a bookshop and want the chance to test it out.
I think in everyone's life you have that what if voice. What if I just owned a bookshop by the sea in Scotland? We want to give people the opportunity to do it. This is actual real virtual reality where you can come and be in a bookshop and feel the cold and read the books and enjoy the community and kind of have the little surprises of an adventure along the way.
And if those who've come on their bookshop holiday are looking for ideas, with Wigtown boasting 14 bookshops, there is plenty here to inspire.
We love our bookshops here. We love our books, and we've even got people coming from far and wide to run a bookshop in Wigtown. Imagine that. I mean, it sounds a crazy idea, but what a fantastic thing for Wigtown, opening Wigtown onto the world, encouraging people to come and share our love for books.
That passion for selling books may be spreading. There's interest from a Chinese firm looking to open its own version of the open book holiday business.
OK, best of luck.
So successful has this Scottish one been, it's booked up for the next 2 years. Lorna Gordon, BBC News, Wigtown.
Does sound like a great holiday, doesn't it? Stay with me on BBC News. I'll be back with a business briefing in just a few moments. We'll have more on Beijing's ban on waste imports and the impact that will have on recycling in the rest of the world. And also tell me what you think about our talking point today. Do you think the sexual misdemeanors in Hollywood last year are going to lead to change in the workplace in 2018? We've now got Hollywood launching a new campaign to help other people who are suffering from sexual harassment. They've raised over $10 million. Let us know what you think. Just use the hashtag BBC The Briefing. I'll be back shortly.
Good morning. There's some stormy weather on the way for the British Isles in the week ahead. Very windy, perhaps gales for many of us, and even severe gales for some, and some heavy rain to boot. All of that said, it's actually quite a quiet start to the day today, quite a chilly one as well, with clear skies and light winds overnight. Temperatures in some spots have dropped down close to freezing. The fine start, though, will be pretty limited. This weather front keen to move its way in from the west, bringing a wet rush hour to Northern Ireland, the rain fringing into western Scotland. Further east, some sunshine and a frosty start. Cloud pushing towards northern England and the Midlands, perhaps some early brightness further east. For Wales, though, and the southwest of England, the wind already picking up and the rain arriving pretty promptly too. The rain will be heavy, but it is going to move through pretty quickly. So for the likes of Wales and the southwest and Northern Ireland, should see a much improved picture even by mid-morning. The rain then across eastern areas lunchtime and pushing out into the North Sea through the afternoon. We may, though, see it falling as snow for a while across the high ground of northern England and Scotland. So do just bear that in mind. Bit quieter through the afternoon, not for long. This is our next area of low pressure that's going to come spinning across the British Isles overnight Tuesday into Wednesday. Widespread strong winds, a swathe of gales, maybe even severe gales across the central region of the British Isles. Some heavy rain too. And even as this low heads off into the North Sea on Wednesday, it still leaves us with widespread strong winds and a continued risk of gales and some pretty meaty and nasty showers. Heavy rain, squally winds and some hail and thunder too. So a very lively day on Wednesday. Quite chilly to the north. To the south, temperatures still just about managing to get into double figures. As for the rest of the week, well, form an orderly queue from the Atlantic areas of low pressure. Here comes our next one for Thursday and Friday. Wet weather sweeping up from the southwest on Thursday. I think all areas experiencing strong winds on Friday, and again, yet more rain. Perhaps on Thursday, something a little drier and brighter in eastern areas, but this rain will push its way right the way across the British Isles overnight Thursday into Friday. And then Friday, well, we're somewhere underneath this swirling area of low pressure. All areas experiencing strong winds. There could be some heavy rain at times too, and starting to turn chillier on Friday as well.
Outside Source doesn't just report a story, it looks at it from every angle. Live data visualizations help us understand what's happening and what it means. Interactive maps take you from a global view right down to street level. Real-time reporting and reaction from social media means you get the latest as we do. And the BBC's unparalleled global expertise allows us to reality check the biggest stories. News for a digital world, Outside Source, with me, Ros Atkins, tonight at 9 on the BBC News Channel.
10 seconds in, stand by. There's a new look to afternoons on the BBC News Channel. We'll bring you all the day's big stories and what's behind them in a way that makes sense to you and me. Plus business, sport and weather.
Lots of sunshine around.
Afternoon Live with me, Simon McCoy, weekdays 2 till 5 on the BBC News Channel. So why not join us? We've got all afternoon.
Every destination has new secrets to discover.
Wow, this place is just hewn out of rock.
It's incredible to believe that no one really knew about it.
The Travel Show is your passport to unique places.
People here have found an ingenious way to harness nature.
And unforgettable experiences.
This is so beautiful. Whoa!
See the world differently. The Travel Show this weekend on the BBC News Channel.
Hello, this is Business Briefing. I'm Samantha Simmonds. Cleaning up its act, Beijing bans the import of plastic waste. We ask what impact that will have on nations that rely on China to recycle their rubbish. Investors focus on the price of the black stuff in 2018 as China edges closer to opening its own market to trade in oil futures. And on the markets, well, Asian stocks kicked off the new year on a high, led by investors in Hong Kong. The Hang Seng saw its highest level in a decade. Plenty more on that. We'll get the latest from Singapore coming up. Now the world gets back to work after the New Year break, leaving behind piles of plastic, textiles and paper waste from the festive season. Much of the stuff we recycle will be shipped to China, but Beijing is now banning imports of a range of waste materials in 2018. 24 different substances have been outlawed as China tries to tackle environmental damage caused by hazardous waste. Each year, the world uses more than 800 million metric tons of scrap commodities to make new stuff, and China is the biggest importer of that. In 2016, the country took in 27% of global scrap material. Plastic is one of the most environmentally damaging materials, of course, yet plastic production is expected to grow by 40% over the next decade. China's clampdown will have a major impact on recycling around the world, as Danny Vincent reports now from Hong Kong.
Recycling in Hong Kong. This may be where your plastic waste ends up. Used plastic comes from near and far, but recyclers must now change the way they process this waste because of China's new ban on used plastic products.
Hong Kong is set to face a challenge when it comes to dealing with plastic waste. Right now, the majority of waste like this goes to mainland China, but that could be set to change.
But the policy change also represents an opportunity for recyclers. Waste management is big business. Hong Kong has a relatively underdeveloped recycling sector. Activists are hoping that the Chinese ban will encourage Hong Kong companies to do more to develop the industry. Andy Lee is the founder of a community-based recycling program.
If the Chinese policy is worked properly, I think the South Asia may think the same policy also, because they don't want to accept the waste from the other country. They want good quality items, good quality recyclable materials.
For years, Hong Kong companies depended on China's appetite for waste products. Now that many plastics are no longer welcomed, these Hong Kong companies will have to process the rubbish themselves if they wish to make a profit. Danny Vincent, BBC News, Hong Kong.
Well, with me now is Laurie Cucuron, General Manager for Europe at TerraCycle. Thank you very much for coming in. Happy New Year to you. I just want to talk first of all about the issue here in Britain with recycling. We've had the Environment Secretary, Michael Gove, say it's a huge issue. He's come up with a couple of suggestions. He said that they need to look to other East Asian nations to recycle the waste, but ultimately we need to deal with the problem here at home. So first of all, what are we going to do with the waste that China won't accept now, and how do we manage to eventually manage to deal with it here in the UK?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think looking at other markets is a good short-term solution, but obviously it won't absorb all the volume of waste that is generated by the country. So I think it's a good opportunity for innovation, for finding new ways to recycle, new ways to collect. So I think in the short term it might be challenging, but I think it's probably a good start to push more innovation forward.
You recycle the waste that you collect within Europe, don't you? You've created your own supply chains, you were just telling me.
Yes, exactly. So TerraCycle is specialized in how to recycle material, everything from cigarette waste to biscuit wrappers, to food pouches. So we try to really look at waste differently. For us, everything is technically recyclable. So it's about finding the right business model to fund a new recycling solution. So we create our own supply chain. We work with collectors, mainly schools, charities, individuals at home that will collect the waste streams for us. And then we work with our R&D team and local partners to locally recycle the waste. So we really try to innovate and find new ways to recycle. Everything is recyclable. It's just about finding the right economics behind it.
Yeah, the issue that we're going to have in this country, and I imagine around the world, is that there isn't going to be that infrastructure in place in the short term to deal with it. So a lot of this stuff is going to have to be incinerated, which itself is damaging for the environment.
Of course, and that's a very bad news, I guess. But I hope this will really, we'll make sure that we can actually innovate quickly, but in the short term there will be damaging solutions for the environment for sure.
Okay, Laurie Cook, really good to talk to you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Now, scientists have been developing a breakthrough gene editing technique called CRISPR, hoping it could treat thousands of genetic diseases. But critics are worried about safety and ethics. In the latest episode from our Disruptor series, we hear from one biotech firm at the cutting edge.
It provides us the ability, we hope, to go in, modify your DNA at the point that's driving the disease and allow us to repair that DNA typo, repair it, fix it in a single or a handful of treatments. This technology has the potential to revolutionize healthcare as we know it today. The speed at which we've moved forward from a discovery in 2012 to being testing in animal systems in 2017, I think, again, is unprecedented.
Over to Asia now, where stock markets began 2018 in good cheer. Let's get more from our Asia Business Hub with Mariko. Oi, Mariko, welcome to you. So what's going on here? The highest market reach in 10 years.
Yes, that's right. That's in Hong Kong. But the rest of the region, they're mostly trading higher as well, basically ignoring the fall that we saw on Wall Street on the final trading day of 2017 and investors focusing on the US tax reform that's set to benefit big corporations. As you mentioned, Hong Kong is by far the standout performer, up by 1.6%. In fact, this is the sixth day in a row that shares are rallying and well above that psychologically important 30,000 mark. And also China is doing quite well thanks to strong economic data. But speaking of China, I also wanted to mention that there are reports that China is edging closer to opening a domestic market to trade oil futures contracts. And that means Chinese buyers will be able to lock in oil prices and pay in local currency. It's not the first time the plan has surfaced, but it's basically Beijing's effort and try and challenge the US dollar's dominance in the oil market.
OK, Mariko, good to talk to you. See you a little later. Now let's brief you on some other business stories. And the Spanish economy minister, Luis de Guindos, has put the cost of the Catalan independence crisis at around €1 billion or $1.2 billion. He told Spanish radio that it was due to the slowdown in the Catalan economy after the unauthorised independence referendum in October. The UK's economy will slow further in 2018 as business spending stalls, interest rates rise and indebted consumers curb their spending. That's the gloomy view of more than 100 leading economists in the Financial Times annual predictions survey. China has long been one of the world's biggest markets for ivory, but as of 2018, all trade in ivory and ivory products in the country is now illegal. The move is being hailed as a major development in efforts to protect the world's elephant population. That story is popular on bbc.com. And now what's trending in the business news this morning. In Business Insider, there's a 40% chance Apple will snap up Netflix thanks to President Trump's corporate tax cuts, which give the tech giant a bigger stash of cash to buy new companies. On Bloomberg, 2018 started badly for Bitcoin. For the first time since 2015, the cryptocurrency began a new year by tumbling. Last year, Bitcoin soared as much as 2,000% before a sharp sell-off. Reuters has this. Star Wars The Last Jedi beat Jumanji over the New Year weekend in the battle of the box office. Last Jedi picked up more than $68 million in that weekend alone. I was one of them who went to see it. Stay with us. Don't forget you can let us know what you're spotting online. Use the hashtag BBC The Briefing. Back shortly. At least 3 unhealthy snacks and drinks a day. That's how much the average child in England is consuming, say Public Health England. It's something they want to change by creating a new rule of thumb for healthier snacking. Look for 100-calorie snacks to a day max. James Gallagher has more.
Half the sugar us kids eat and drink each year comes from snacks and sugary drinks.
Kids get through a mountain of sugary snacks each year. Cake, ice cream, pop, juice, biscuits, sweets and chocolate. Children eat 3 times more sugar than official advice. Just over half of it comes from snacking between meals. It's one reason more than a quarter of children have rotten teeth by the time they turn 5. This Public Health England campaign is warning that snacking has got out of hand and is increasing the risk of type 2 diabetes, heart disease and cancer.
We're very concerned about snacking. Our children have unhealthy diets, they're eating too many calories, they're eating too much sugar, and snacking is part of the problem. We're encouraging parents to be aware of snacking and to try and cut back and replace unhealthy snacks with better snacks.
So how do parents feel about snacking?
I know kids like sweets, but you know, and all the sugary stuff you get from shops and McDonald's and things like that, but it's for the parents to keep an eye on them and their intake.
Public Health England is advising snacks are limited to just 100 calories and eaten no more than twice a day. It says fruit and veg are ideal, and even malt loaf, fromage frais that's low in sugar, and crumpets are better than anything you'll find in the confectionery aisles. James Gallagher, BBC News.
Coming up at 6 o'clock on Breakfast, the team will have more on the rise in UK rail fares, which at an average of 3.4% amounts to the largest increase for 5 years. The programme will have analysis on why it's happening and reaction from passengers. This is the briefing from BBC News. The latest headlines. There are new claims that many African migrants are being imprisoned, abused and forced to work as slaves in Libya. The UN has called living conditions for the majority of migrants inhumane. Hundreds of stars and Hollywood insiders have launched a campaign in the US to fight sexual harassment at work. The initiative, called Time's Up, focuses on people with low-paid jobs. Storm Carmen has cut power to tens of thousands of homes in western France. Wind speeds of up to 140 kilometres an hour battered the country's Atlantic coast and is moving towards Germany. Now it's time to look at the stories that are making the headlines in media across the world. We begin with the Gulf news and the current unrest in Iran. The death toll in a wave of protests throughout the country has climbed as security forces clash with demonstrators. Meanwhile, The Guardian leads on the recent spate of knife attacks in London. 4 young men were stabbed to death during New Year's celebrations in the capital. The FT focuses on the UK economy in 2018, where, according to more than 100 leading economists, Britain will experience a slowdown in growth due to lack of business investment and rising interest rates. The South China Morning Post investigates how the stellar performance of US markets stands in stark contrast to the political crises that continue to engulf the Trump administration. And finally, the Court's website looks at the downside of New Year's Eve celebration, saying that when it comes to nursing a hangover, you are essentially on your own. According to new scientific research, the effects of alcohol depend heavily on our genetic and physical makeup. Well, let's take a more thorough look at some of them. Joining me is Dr. Stephanie Hare, who's an independent political risk analyst. Welcome back, Stephanie. So we're leading with the Gulf news, and the death toll climbs to 12 is their headline. It may have gone up even more since this headline was written, as Iran unrest worsens, now in its 6th day. And these are demonstrations, protests, seem to have come out of nowhere. Essentially, we think over the price of eggs going up. But now they've really spread, haven't they?
Yes. We think the trigger for this is that the government unveiled its budget back in December, and that budget really spares the state organizations and religious institutions of the country from the austerity that is being imposed so severely on ordinary citizens. So you're absolutely right to point out we've got high unemployment, we've got high inflation, and Iranians are not seeing the benefits yet, they feel, of the deal that they made with the P5+1 2 years ago. So it hasn't trickled through yet, and it's really come to a crunch point.
Yeah, we've had President Rouhani say that he welcomes protests, but at the same time, we've now got the security forces massively clamping down.
Yes, and throttling messaging platforms as well. So Telegram, which is used by 40 million Iranians, has been basically shut down.
And that's how they were coordinating
exactly
these protests.
And also getting news out to the rest of the world, right? So it's very difficult for us to even know exactly what's happening within Iran at the moment. So very interesting game or dynamic that's emerging there.
And to see where it's all going to go, because we know from history the last protest nearly a decade ago were clamped down on very heavily. Many hundreds of people were imprisoned then. Is it going to go this way? We've got President Trump intervening, saying on Twitter, not surprisingly, Iran is failing at every level despite the terrible deal made with them. He's talking about the Iran nuclear deal. So he's intervening. Iran, he said time for a change. Iran said none of your business. Is it helpful, his intervention?
Well, I think what's different about this particular episode is that, unlike what happened in 2009, we don't have a very clear leadership of these protests. We're not really even sure what people want yet. So it could be a case of, if there was a way to tweak that budget and give people some relief, perhaps that could fizzle out. Now, it could also go completely, another direction. It's very difficult to predict in something like this, but I think it's probably less going to be about any intervention from a foreign power or commentary over Twitter than about easing economic pain.
OK, let's take a look at The Guardian now. And they're talking about fatal stabbings here in the UK, specifically really in London, with a spate of attacks over New Year's Eve, taking the death toll in the capital to 80 last year. It's a huge number. I'm talking about the issues involved. Why is the number so high?
Well, it's interesting because I remember back when they were, they're saying here that the height of knife attacks was something like 2008, and now we've seen a resurgence. So for a while it had dipped, and now it's coming back up. And it's a great question. It tends to be among younger men. It tends to be in urban areas, but it's happening across the country. And so far, London Mayor Sadiq Khan has struggled to get it under control, but it's a top priority for him. So I don't think we know necessarily what's led to it yet.
There seems to be a problem with understanding the cultural root causes of it. And I guess until that happens, putting posters up, certainly people who are critical of the government's response are saying, putting posters up say, don't carry a knife. Well, it's not going to work. Actually, you need to get into schools, get into communities and try and understand the issues to deal with it, right at the root cause of it all.
Well, and also the head of London's Metropolitan Police, Cressida Dick, was also saying that we need further police resources on it. So I just think it's very interesting that we had that spike in 2008. It's gone down, it's come back up. What's changed?
Yeah. OK, let's move on to the Financial Times. A quite alarming headline here. Growth is going to slow to 1.5%. This is according to a leading poll of economists, something they do at the beginning of the year every year, don't they? What do you make of this figure?
Well, what's interesting is, the Office for Budget Responsibility in this country said it'd be around 1.4%. Here, these economists are saying 1.5%. Is that a disaster? To put this into context, Japan's is supposed to be something like 1.3%. Italy would be the same. France, 1.7%. Germany, 1.8%. So the UK is somewhere in the middle. And there's the great unspoken, right, of what is possibly causing this. And we know it's Brexit, right?
Uncertainty.
So we've got interest rates going up. So the Bank of England raised interest rates for the first time in a decade back in November. So consumers are going to be aware of that. We've got very high household debt in this country, so that might be, cause people to be a bit more cautious. But it's really going to be about how these Brexit negotiations are perceived. If they're perceived to be going well, maybe business will continue investing and we'll get a stronger performance. If they look like they're going off the rails, that is going to be the thing that could really see a sluggish performance.
They do say they expect exports to rise, don't they?
Yes, and that is nothing to do with the UK. That's to do with the global economy, which is doing pretty well and looks like it's going to be picking up in 2018. So UK exporters can expect to benefit from that.
What do you think it's going to mean for people's kind of money in their pockets? I mean, you've talked about interest rates, you talked about the high household debt that we have in this country.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting when we get the Christmas spending figures out, probably any day now, to see what impact that's all have had. But I suppose that's what affects, real ordinary people. How much do they feel they've got in their pocket to spend on ordinary everyday items?
Exactly, and it really depends on who we're talking about here. So we're looking at moderate wage growth. That's going to bump up inflation a little bit, but that's why they've bumped up the interest rate, the main interest rate. So the Bank of England is playing with a couple of different levers, and then consumers will have to respond in kind. So if you're somebody who's highly indebted, you're probably going to rein in your own personal spending. Totally different if we're talking about corporates, right? Business investment. They will have a different perspective on that. For that, that's really going to be about business continuity and really what we're seeing negotiated, I'd say, probably by May of this year with regards to Brexit. So the next 5 months will be crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. OK, let's have a look at the South China Morning Post here. The headline here is "Whole Universe is Apart." And this is about what impact or otherwise Donald Trump has actually had on the US economy. Because when he came into office this time last year, there were so many doom-mongers saying it's going to be catastrophic for the US economy. What's actually played out here? And this explains or tries to look at what role Donald Trump has had.
Well, it's interesting because I'm seeing a parallel with our first story in Iran. So it really depends on who we're talking about in the economy. The US economy is doing really well if you're already rich, right? So great for them, great for businesses. Businesses are going to love Donald Trump. He's part of the Republican Party. He's all about slashing taxes. The budget that the government has just patched is really in favor of the wealthy. So for a certain crew, the kind of crew who are invested in the stock market, making deals, doing business investment, Donald Trump is great news. But for the rest of the country, people are really struggling in the middle class, in the working poor, people who don't have access to good health care, all of that. People are working several jobs just to get by. That's what we're not seeing in this article. This article is focused very much on Wall Street, which is fair enough. Wall Street's loving this, but there's a disconnect from the rest of the country.
Does it explain what impact or otherwise Donald Trump has had on the economy, whether actually the good news on the market fronts is anything to do with policy, or are the two actually mutually exclusive?
I mean, it's a salutary lesson for anyone doing political risk, right? So he makes so much noise, he generates so much light and heat, but really, is the U.S. economic performance more about how the rest of the global economy is doing, right? What's happening with the price of oil, what's happening with emerging markets, which are expected to, the top emerging market economies are looking at 5% growth this year. what's actually important here. It might not be as much as we think about Donald Trump, and far more about macroeconomic factors and things that are more long-term.
And is that possibly a good thing? Well, we'll have to
I would
see
like
what
to take the fifth.
2018
I plead the fifth, as Americans say.
We'll see what 2018 holds. So far, also quiet on the tweeting front. So there's a funny story here in Time all about hangovers. Many people will have been nursing those yesterday as they welcomed in the new year. And this story basically says, you know, over the years, decades, hundreds of years, I'm sure there's been all kinds of suggestions as to how you deal with a hangover, the best way to cure it. And this article is saying, actually, they're all a load of tosh.
But we all have that friend who seems to be able to go out and have a really good night out, and the next day is fine, whereas you're sort of, you know, wearing your sunglasses and asking for no noise. So
hiding in your bedroom.
Yeah, probably prevention is better than cure.
So what is it? So is the issue that actually it has nothing to do with the cure? It's to do with your own body and how much you've drunk and
different people metabolize alcohol at different rates. It's the kind of alcohol. So if you're drinking wine all night versus spirits, you know, there's people who have this down to a fine science. Yeah. And there's also the fact that you're dehydrating because you're drinking so much alcohol. So should you be having more water, go to bed with some paracetamol, have a fry up the next day.
What about that old line the stomach with milk before you go out? I'm not sure about that one. Never appealed to me. Stephanie, thank you so much for taking us through the papers. Thank you. Well, thanks for watching The Briefing. From me, Samantha Simmonds, and the rest of the team, goodbye for now.
Good morning. We have some very stormy weather to come in the week ahead. Winds often touching up to gale force widely across the British Isles, and some heavy rain to contend with too. Ahead of all that, actually quite quiet this morning. Light winds overnight and clear skies mean for some of us it could be a frosty start, but quickly we're going to then watch this band of rain winging its way in to the west. So the fine weather not set to last. A dry start though.